Good morning. It is September 5th, 2023. We're going to be doing the New York Times. Today's propagandist is David Leonhardt, covering the surge in school absences as well as China's real estate crisis, an Antarctic rescue, and a missing Beatles guitar. Empty seat. If you're a child or a former child, because, wow. You know how hard it can be to summon the energy to leave the house each day for school. It's early in the morning and you are tired. Maybe you have a test or a social situation that's making you anxious. Staying in bed often seems easier. For as long as school have existed, so have these morning struggles. Nonetheless, children overcome them almost every day, sometimes with a strong nudge from parents. Going to school was the normal thing to do. Then suddenly, it wasn't. The long school closure during the corona pandemic was the biggest disruption in the history of modern American education. And those closures changed the way many students and parents think about school. Attendance, in short, has come to feel more optional than it once did, and absenteeism has soared, remaining high even as corona has stopped dominating everyday life. Except it's not. Remember, it's coming back, and you want the mask mandates back. It was always a bad excuse. It was always a bad idea. On an average day last year, the 2022-23 school year, close to 10% of K-12 students were not there. Preliminary state data suggests about 1/4 of U.S. students qualify as chronically absent, meaning that they missed at least 10% of school days, or about 3.5 weeks. That's vastly higher share than before. So let's see. California, 30% increase. Texas, 25. Florida, 32. New York 33, Pennsylvania 26, Illinois 30, Ohio 30, Georgia 24, North Carolina 31, and Michigan 39. Yeah, I'm not shocked. I'm just as stunned by the magnitude, said Thomas D., a Stanford economist who has conducted the most comprehensive study on the issue. The surge of absenteeism is more than one problem confronting schools as they reopen for a new academic year. Students still have not made up the ground they lost during the pandemic, and it's much harder for them to do so if they are missing from classroom. You know what else is much harder for them to do if the schools are garbage? They're the same as they were when I was a kid 30 years ago, and they were terrible then, they're terrible now. Not much has changed. They still have the same buildings, the same... they still have the same chairs as when I was a little kid. They were uncomfortable then. They're uncomfortable now. The kids didn't want to sit in them then. They don't want to sit in them now. Doing it early in the morning, all data proves that it's useless, that your brain doesn't even start working well until 10 o'clock in the morning. So everything from 8 o'clock till 10 is basically worthless and you're not doing anything productive. Study after study shows that it would be much better to have shorter days for longer. So we go to school longer in the summertime. We have fewer days that we go to school, and that would work out a lot better. We don't have a good system in this country, and we don't want a good system because a good system would create critically thinking people, and the people that run the system would not be able to continue to do it because people would stop trusting them because they're blatant liars. Losing the habit. In Dee's study, he looked for explanations for the trend, and the obvious suspects didn't explain it. Placed with greater corona spread did not have a higher lingering levels of absenteeism, for instance. The biggest reason for the rise seems to be simply that students have fallen out of the habit of going to school every day. Consistent with the theory is the fact that absenteeism has risen more in states where schools remain closed for longer during the pandemic, like California and New Mexico, and in Washington, D.C. The chart below shows the correlation between Dee's state data on chronic absenteeism and the data from Thomas Kane, a Harvard economist, on the share of students in each state who in 2020, 2021 were enrolled in districts where the most students were in remote. And you can kind of just see the least ones, Arkansas down here at the bottom. We have New Mexico and California, Alaska, Arizona, the ones where they were closed the longest. For almost 2 years, we told families that school can look different and that schoolwork could be accomplished in times outside of the traditional 8 to 3 day. Elmer Roldan, who runs the Dropout Prevention Group, told the LA Times families got used to that. Lisa Damour, a psychologist and author of The Emotional Lives of Teenagers, points out that parents think they are doing the right thing when they allow an anxious child to skip a day of school. She has a deep empathy for the parents, she said. Doing so often makes the child feel better in the moment, but there are costs. My daughter didn't want to go to school today after a 4-day weekend. She was not feeling well, and I'm like, yeah, you have to go. The most fundamental thing for adults to understand is that avoidance feeds anxiety. Damer told me when any of us are fearful, our instinct is to avoid. But the problem with giving into that anxiety is that avoidance is highly reinforcing. The more often students skip school, the harder it becomes to get back in the habit of going. Aggravated inequality. I know that some readers will wonder whether families are making a rational choice by keeping their children home, given all the problems with schools today. The unhealthily early start times for many schools. So I just mentioned that. The political fights over curriculum, the bullying and the vaping, the inequalities that afflict so many areas of American life. And the rise in chronic absenteeism is indeed a sign that schools need help. One promising step would be to make teaching a more appealing job, Damore notes, in order to attract more great teachers. Still, it's worth remembering that the rise in absenteeism isn't solving these larger problems. It is adding to those problems. So one thing they're not going to mention is that most teachers are women, and women don't do a good job teaching men. Classrooms are more chaotic places when many students are there one day and missing the next. Educational inequality increases too because absenteeism has risen more among disadvantaged students, including students with disabilities and those from lower income households. Studies show that even after adjusting for poverty levels and race, children who skip more school get significantly worse grades, The Economist recently explained. As Heidi Chang, who runs Attendance Works, a nonprofit group focused on the problem, told the Associated Press, the long-term consequences of disengaging from school are devastating. Many schools are now trying to reduce absenteeism by reaching out to families. Some school officials are visiting homes in person, while others are sending texts to parents. It will be a hard problem to solve, the study found, focused on the 21-22 school year, which was 2 years ago and the first year after the extended corona closures. But he notes that absenteeism appears to have fallen only slightly last year. In Connecticut, which has some of the best data and lowest absentee rates than most states, 7.8% of students missed on average a day 2 years ago, a far higher level than before the pandemic. Last year, the rate dipped only to 7.6%. More in education. Americans losing faith in the value of college. 45% of Gen Z say that high school diploma is all they need for financial security. Well, that's true, and it should be much higher than that because most college diplomas do not pay off. We see this by the massive student loan debt problem that can't be paid. Doctors, lawyers, engineers, they don't have problem paying their debts back. It's all the useless degrees in gender studies, humanities, underwater basket weaving, and porn. There are literally dozens of colleges that offer degrees in pornography. Why you would need that, I do not know, but they offer them. Let's see. After the Supreme Court's affirmative action decision, students must decide whether to mention race in their college applications. You shouldn't need to. It shouldn't matter. That's one of those things. That's what the court did, is show that it should be merit-based. And if we're going to do it merit-based, then yeah, mostly Asians are going to get into schools. Oh, well, if they're the ones that are the best, that's who should go. Let's see, in China's biggest property developer, Country Garden, avoided default with a last-minute interest payment, but billions more to repay within the next year. Yeah, that's fake. The company's troubles are part of a real estate crisis that's threatening China's economy. Chinese people, sometimes posing as tourists, breached U.S. military sites up to 100 times in recent years, an act of potential espionage. Yeah, that's a whole lot more than those 100 times that we know about. And Biden will do nothing because he's feckless. International hostage diplomacy. Iran is using an imprisoned EU official as a bargaining chip against the West. Pope Francis visited Mongolia. A few Chinese Catholics crossed the border to see him, seemingly because they were afraid their government would punish them. Yeah, I would expect that. Trailing in the polls with an election on the horizon, Britain's Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is turning to divisive issues like refugees and crime. Yeah, he should be worried a lot. He's been terrible. Of course, not like Liz was much better. Okay, war in Ukraine. Zelensky removed their defense minister after accusations of financial mismanagement. That's not all. Is struggling to eliminate corruption in his government. It's one of the world's most corrupt countries, and we keep giving them billions of dollars and acting like it's not going down a black hole of corruption. Kim Jong-un is planning to visit Putin in Russia to discuss supplying weapons. That's interesting. People in liberated Ukrainian village still lack electricity and water, and mines are everywhere. Yeah, they don't have that because Ukraine blew up a dam, and that's why the Russians let them have those particular areas, because they're useless. The impeachment trial of Texas Attorney General, which starts today, will be a fight over the future of the Republican Party. I don't know about that, but it's certainly going to be interesting. Joe Biden tested positive for corona, but President Biden did not. Ground floors of buildings, long valuable real estate asset are now empty in cities like San Francisco and Washington. Yeah, because of crime. And because of rampant lawlessness and drug abuse, and the cities are falling apart. I like how you don't even mention that. New York City begins restricting short term home rentals today. Thousands of listings are expected to disappear from Airbnb. Let's see. A rescue team broke through Antarctic ice and flew helicopters on a dangerous mission to reach a sick worker at a research station. An audit accused state troopers in Connecticut of faking thousands of traffic stops. Probably, it said, to game internal performance statistics. Hey, you know what? Good on them for not, like, if they had a whole quota system and they had to fill the quota, they just faked it rather than going out and giving people tickets. Good on them. I like it. Get rid of the quotas. That's the problem. No police should ever have quotas. That should not be a thing. To strengthen free speech on campus, universities need to bring civic education back to the heart of curriculums. Yeah, that'd be a good idea. Man, the first thing that you could teach is that you don't have the right to dictate to other people how they think and feel, liberals. Let's see. Yeah, the king of yacht rock influenced style as much as any designer. Wellness retreat. The travel industry is catering to women who want help dealing with menopause. That's a good target audience. There's a bunch of boomers who are hitting that, so that's good money, dude. Marilyn Lovell became a celebrity as the wife of Jim Lovell, who captained the disaster-struck Apollo 13 moon. Oh, captained the disaster-struck Apollo 13 moon mission. She died at 93. The bass that made the Beatles. In 1961, Paul McCartney bought a bass guitar that he played as the Beatles became famous. It can be heard on songs like Love Me Do and Twist and Shout, but it vanished 8 years later and has been missing since. The Lost Bass project, started by the Beatles fans, hopes to find it, and hundreds of people have responded to requests for tips. Steve Harwell, the former singer of Smash Mouth, known for the 90s hits All-Star and Walking in the Sun, died at 56. That is such a shame, man. Died of liver failure at 56. I mean, gosh. Some people were talking about he drank, but honestly, it's the food. It's all this horrible food we eat. We've got to get better diets. People come here from other countries and they eat the same thing that they eat in their country, and they're like, I get fat when I come here. And Americans, when they go to other countries, eat the exact same thing. You can see this. Like, if you look at a bottle of ketchup here versus in the EU, there's no high fructose corn syrup in the one in the EU. They don't allow that there. I mean, as much as I dislike the regulations of the EU, at least they're not letting people eat poison. Thousands of people left at the Burning Man Festival after being stranded in the mud. Yeah, that's just hilarious. I love that. Global warming. Global boiling, remember. Cold sesame seed noodles with cucumbers and corn. Cold noodles? Who would want to eat that? And that looks like friggin' inedible plants. Ugh. Cook with the best skillet wire cutters ever tested. Work from your sofa with the best lab desk. NFL season to preview. Did we not have... Where's the real estate thing? I guess they didn't do that today. Okay. This date in history, September 5th. On September 5th, 1774, the First Continental Congress assembled in Philadelphia. In 1698, Russia's Peter the Great imposed tax on beards. In 1864, voters in Louisiana approved a new state constitution abolishing slavery. In 1939, 4 days after the war had broken out in Europe, President FDR issued a proclamation declaring U.S. neutrality in the conflict. And then we went on to make a bunch of loans to nationalist China, freeze Japanese oil imports and freeze their money. And we also supplied the Germans, and we supplied the British, and we interfered in between the Russians and the British too. And so, yeah, we weren't neutral at all. That was all lies. That's why the Japanese attacked us. In 1960, at the Rome Olympics, American boxer Cassius Clay, later Muhammad Ali, defeated Zbigniew, the Polish dude, to win the light heavyweight, sorry, Poland, Gold medal title. William Rudolph of the United States won the second of her Wilma Rudolph. Sorry, Wilma. Won the second of her 3 gold medals with the 200-meter sprint. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy signed legislation making aircraft hijackings a federal crime. In 1972, the Palestinian group Black September attacked the Israeli Olympic delegation at the Munich Games, killing 11 members of the Israeli Olympic team and a police officer. German forces killed 5 of the gunmen. In 1975, President Gerald R. Ford escaped in his attempt on his life by Lynette Squeaky Fromm, a disciple of Charles Manson in Sacramento, California. In 1986, 4 hijackers who seized a Pan Am jumbo jet on the ground in Karachi, Pakistan, opened fire when the lights inside the plane failed. A total of 20 people were killed before the Pakistani commandos stormed the jetliner. In 1991, the 35th Annual Navy Aviation Symposium held by the Tallyhook Association opened in Las Vegas. During the 4-day gathering, there were reports that a dozen people, most of them women, were sexually assaulted or otherwise harassed. The episode triggered the resignation of Navy Secretary H. Lawrence. I did not know about that one. 1997, Mother Teresa died in Calcutta, India at age 87. Let's see. 2016, Hugh O'Brien, the actor who shot to fame as Sheriff Wyatt Earp in what was hailed as television's first adult Western, died in Beverly Hills, California at the age of 91. In 2012, Barack Obama was nominated to run for a second term as a Democratic National Convention in Charlotte, North Carolina. No birthdays today.